The alarm screamed through the corridors of the human exploration ship Pathfinder. Red warning lights flashed in every room, casting angry shadows on the walls. Captain Blake ran down the main hallway, his boots hitting the metal floor with heavy thuds. "Tom," he shouted over the noise. "What's happening to my ship?" Engineer Tom looked up from his control panel, sweat dripping down his face. His hands moved quickly over the buttons and switches, but nothing seemed to work. "Captain, the main engine is dead. The backup systems are failing too. We're losing power everywhere." The ship shook violently. Blake grabbed onto a wall to keep from falling. Through the windows, he could see a planet getting bigger and bigger. They were falling toward it fast. "How long do we have?" Blake asked. Tom checked his screens again. The numbers were not good. "Maybe 10 minutes before we hit the surface. I can't stop our fall, but I might be able to slow it down a little." Blake pressed a button on the wall. His voice echoed through the entire ship. "All crew, this is the captain. Prepare for emergency landing. Get to your crash positions now. This is not a drill." 30 people lived and worked on the Pathfinder. They were explorers, scientists, and engineers who had left Earth 6 months ago to map new worlds. Now they were about to crash on a planet they knew nothing about. Medical Officer Lisa ran through the ship helping people get ready. She checked that everyone had their safety belts on tight. Some crew members were scared. Others tried to stay calm. Lisa did her best to help them all. "Will we be okay?" asked Jake, one of the younger crew members. Lisa put her hand on his shoulder. "We're tough, we'll make it through this." But inside, she wasn't so sure. The planet they were falling toward looked dangerous. The sensors showed strange storms, high radiation and ground that moved like it was alive. Most planets humans had visited were much safer than this one. In the engine room, Tom worked like his life depended on it, because it did. He rerouted power from every system he could. The lights dimmed as he sent all energy to the emergency thrusters. "Come on," he whispered to the ship. "Just give me a little more." The thrusters fired. The ship's fall slowed down, but not by much. It was like trying to stop a falling mountain with a small fan. Captain Blake strapped himself into his chair on the bridge. Through the front window, he could see the planet's surface rushing toward them. It was covered in sharp rocks, deep valleys, and what looked like volcanoes. Not the kind of place anyone would choose to land. 30 seconds. Tom's voice came through the speakers. Blake grabbed the ship's communication system. He had to try one last thing. "This is Captain Blake of the Earthship Pathfinder. We are crashing on an unknown planet. If anyone can hear this message, we need help. Our location is..." He read off the coordinates. "We have 30 people on board. Please send rescue." But space was big and empty. The message would take years to reach Earth, if it reached anywhere at all. The ground was very close. Now, Blake could see individual rocks and cracks in the planet's surface. "Hold on, everyone." The Pathfinder hit the ground like a giant hammer hitting an egg. The crash was terrible. The front of the ship crumpled like paper. Windows broke into a million pieces. The metal hull tore open in several places. The sound was louder than thunder, and it seemed to go on forever. Then everything was quiet. Blake opened his eyes. His head hurt, and something warm was running down his face. Blood. He was alive, but his ship was broken. Smoke filled the air, and he could smell burning metal. "Tom? Lisa? Anyone?" he called out. Slowly, voices answered him, but not all of them. Some of his crew would never answer again. Tom crawled out from under some fallen pipes. His arm was hurt, but he could still move it. "Captain, we need to get out of here fast. The ship's power core is unstable. If it explodes..." Blake didn't need him to finish. They had to evacuate the survivors immediately. Lisa appeared, helping an injured crew member walk. Her medical bag was in her other hand. "We have 14 people hurt, 3 very badly. And," she paused, "we lost 16 crew members in the crash." The number hit Blake like a punch to the stomach. 16 good people were dead, half of his crew. But he couldn't think about that now. He had to save the ones who were still alive. "Everyone who can walk help someone who can't," Blake ordered. "We're leaving the ship now." The survivors worked together to get out of the broken Pathfinder. They carried the injured and grabbed whatever supplies they could find: food, water, medical equipment, tools, anything that might help them stay alive. Outside the ship, the planet was even worse than it looked from space. The air was thin and tasted like metal. The ground shook every few minutes like something huge was moving under their feet. Strange lightning flashed in the red sky, and the wind howled like an angry animal. "This place is trying to kill us," said Mike, one of the engineers. Blake looked around at his remaining crew. 14 people stood with him on this hostile world. They were hurt, scared, and far from home. But they were alive. "Tom, can you check if any of the ship's systems still work? We need to know what we have left." Tom nodded and carefully went back into the damaged ship. A few minutes later, he came out shaking his head. "Main computer is dead. Communications are gone. Life support failed. But I can salvage some parts. Maybe build basic equipment." Lisa was busy treating the wounded. "We need shelter," she said, without looking up from her patient. "Some of these people won't survive a night in the open." Blake surveyed the area around their crash site. Sharp rocks stuck up from the ground like teeth. In the distance, he could see what looked like caves in a cliff face. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. "We'll make camp near those caves," he decided. "It'll give us some protection from the wind and storms." As they worked to move their injured crew members and supplies, none of them knew that their crash had been detected. Far above the planet, sensors on alien ships had picked up their distress signal. Help was coming. But it was the kind of help that might make their situation much more complicated. The survivors of the Pathfinder had no idea that they had just crash-landed on what the galaxy considered one of the most dangerous worlds in known space. To them, it was just another challenge to overcome. After all, they were from Earth. They were used to hostile environments. 3 days had passed since the Pathfinder crashed on the hostile planet. The human survivors had worked without rest to stay alive. They built a shelter using pieces of their broken ship, creating walls that could protect them from the violent storms and strange radiation. Tom wiped sweat from his forehead as he finished connecting some wires. "There," he said with satisfaction. "The water filter is working. We can drink from the underground streams now." Captain Blake nodded approvingly. The water on this planet had looked poisonous at first, but Tom's makeshift filter made it safe, enough to drink. It still tasted terrible, but it kept them alive. Lisa came back from checking the area around their camp. She carried something that looked like a small animal over her shoulder. "Dinner," she announced with a tired smile. The creature she had caught was about the size of a dog, but it had 6 legs and armor-like skin. Sharp teeth filled its mouth, and its claws could probably cut through metal. To the humans, it was just another source of food. "These things are everywhere," Lisa continued. "They're not very smart, but they're fast. Good thing I used to hunt, back on Earth." Mike looked at the dead creature with doubt. "Are you sure it's safe to eat?" "I tested some tissue samples," Lisa replied. "It's fine for humans. Actually has good protein content." What the humans didn't know was that this small creature was considered one of the most dangerous predators on 12 different worlds. Most alien species needed heavy weapons and armor just to survive an encounter with one. As they prepared their meal, none of them noticed the ships approaching from space. Commander Thane of the Vorthan Empire stood on the bridge of his rescue vessel. He was 9 feet tall with thick gray skin that was harder than most metals. His race had evolved on a world where everything tried to kill them, so they had become the ultimate warriors. "Sir," said his communications officer, "we're getting close to the crash site, but the readings are strange." Thane looked at the screens showing the planet below. "What do you mean, strange?" "Well, sir, our sensors show life signs at the crash location. Multiple beings, still alive." Thane laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Impossible. Nothing can survive on World 7 for more than a few hours. Your equipment must be broken." But as their ships entered the planet's atmosphere, the sensors kept showing the same thing. Not only were there survivors, but they seemed to be moving around freely. They had built structures. They were actively hunting the local wildlife. This makes no sense, Thane muttered. He had trained on planets like this one. Even with his people's natural armor and strength, it took all their skill just to survive. What kind of species could actually thrive here? The Vorthan ships landed near, the human camp with a roar of engines. The ground shook as the massive vessels touched down. Steam rose from their hulls as the planet's hostile atmosphere tried to eat through the metal. The humans heard the ships coming long before they could see them. Blake gathered his crew together, making sure the injured were protected behind their makeshift walls. First contact, he said quietly. Everyone stay calm. We don't know if they're friendly. The ship's doors opened with a hiss of escaping air. Massive figures in powered armor stepped out onto the rocky ground. Even with their protective suits, the Vorthans moved carefully in this dangerous environment. Commander Thane was the first to approach the human camp. His armor made him look even larger than he already was. When he spoke, his voice came through a translator device. Greetings, unknown species, Thane said in a tone that sounded amused. I am Commander Thane of the Vorthan Empire. We received your distress signal. Captain Blake stepped forward. Next to the massive alien, he looked very small. Thank you for coming. I'm Captain Blake. We crashed here 3 days ago and lost half our crew. Thane looked around the human camp with surprise. These creatures had not only survived, but they had built shelter, found food and water, and even treated their wounded. Most species would be dead by now. You are very lucky to be alive, Thane said. This world is extremely dangerous. We must evacuate you immediately to save your lives. Blake frowned. Evacuate? We appreciate the offer, but we're working on repairing our ship. We need to get home to Earth. Earth? Thane accessed his ship's database. When the information came up, his expression changed. The planet these small beings called home had environmental readings that made World 7 look like a vacation resort. Your homeworld? Thane paused, checking the data again. The gravity is crushing. The weather systems could destroy cities. Your sun bathes the planet in deadly radiation. How do you survive there? Tom stepped up beside his captain. Survive? That's just normal life for us. Earth can be tough, but you learn to deal with it. Thane stared at the human engineer. These beings considered a death world to be normal? What kind of monsters were they? Look, Blake said. We're grateful for your help, but we can handle ourselves. We just need some time to fix our ship. To prove their point, Tom walked over to a piece of ship debris that had been blocking their path. The metal beam weighed nearly half a ton. Tom grabbed it and lifted it over his head, then moved it aside like it was made of cardboard. The Vorthans stepped back in shock. That beam would have required 3 of their warriors to move safely. Lisa came back from her latest hunting trip, dragging another one of the 6-legged predators behind her. She had killed it with a simple knife and her bare hands. Got another one, she called out cheerfully. These things are getting easier to catch. Commander Thane's translator must have been broken. This small, soft-looking being had just casually killed a creature that his people used to test their young warriors. But the real shock came when one of his soldiers slipped on the rocky ground and cut his arm on some sharp metal. The wound was bleeding through his armor. Lisa immediately went to help. Let me look at that, she said, pulling out her medical supplies. Wait, Thane warned. The electromagnetic field here will scramble your brain in minutes. You need protection. Lisa looked confused. Electromagnetic field? Oh, you mean that tingling feeling in the air? She continued working on the injured Vorthan without any protection at all. I barely notice it anymore. The Vorthans watched in amazement as Lisa treated their wounded soldier, while standing in an energy field that should have killed her instantly. She worked quickly and efficiently, as if deadly radiation was just a minor inconvenience. There, Lisa said, finishing the bandage. That should heal up fine, just keep it clean. Commander Thane realized he wasn't dealing with lucky survivors. These beings had evolved on a world so dangerous that they considered this hostile planet to be manageable. They weren't weak creatures who needed rescue. They were apex predators who didn't even know how terrifying they were. "What kind of species are you?" Thane asked in wonder. Blake smiled. "We're humans, and we're a lot tougher than we look." Commander Thane spent the night in his ship, studying the humans' data files. What he found made his blood run cold. The more he learned about Earth, the more he realized these small beings were far more dangerous than any enemy the Vorthan Empire had ever faced. He called his officers together for an emergency meeting. "Look at these numbers," Thane said, showing them Earth's environmental data on the main screen. "Their planet has weather systems that could level our cities, earthquakes that would crack our strongest buildings, and they live through this every day." His second-in-command, Officer Kane, studied the information. "Sir, this can't be right. No species could evolve under these conditions." "That's what I thought too," Thane replied. "But watch this." He played recordings from their encounter with the humans. The video showed Tom lifting the metal beam, Lisa working in deadly radiation, and the humans casually eating creatures that most species feared. "They don't even realize how dangerous they are," Thane continued. "To them, this is normal behavior." Meanwhile, the humans were having their own meeting around their campfire. The cooked meat from Lisa's hunt smelled good, and everyone was feeling better after 3 days of hard work. "The aliens seem nice enough," Blake said, chewing thoughtfully. "But they keep talking about evacuating us, like we can't take care of ourselves." Tom poked the fire with a stick. "Did you see how shocked they were when I moved that beam? It wasn't even that heavy. And the way they reacted when I treated their wounded soldier," Lisa added. "You'd think they'd never seen basic first aid before." Jake, one of the younger crew members, looked worried. "Maybe we should accept their help. This planet is pretty dangerous." Blake shook his head. "We've handled worse. Remember the storms on Europa? Or the acid rain on Kepler 9? This place isn't so bad once you get used to it." What the humans didn't understand was that they were comparing this death world to other death worlds. Most species in the galaxy lived on gentle planets with controlled climates and few natural dangers. The next morning, Commander Thane approached the human camp with a formal offer. "Captain Blake," he said through his translator, "the Vorthan Empire has many beautiful worlds. Safe places with good weather, clean air, and no dangerous animals. We can take you and your people to one of these paradise worlds. You would never have to worry about survival again." Blake looked around at his crew. They were dirty and tired, but they were working together to solve their problems. This was what humans did best. "Thank you for the generous offer," Blake replied politely. "But we need to repair our ship and get back to Earth. Our families are waiting for us." Thane couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You want to go back to that nightmare world? When we're offering you paradise?" "Earth isn't a nightmare," Tom said, joining the conversation. "It's home. Sure, it can be challenging sometimes, but that's just life." Thane's mind raced. These beings were refusing safety to return to a death world. Either they were insane, or they were hiding something valuable on their planet. He decided to investigate further. "Tell me about your wars," Thane said suddenly. The humans looked confused. "Our wars?" Blake asked. "Your database shows constant fighting throughout your history. Your species battles itself continuously." Lisa laughed. "Well, yeah, humans don't always get along, but we're working on that. We've been more peaceful in recent centuries." Thane accessed more of their historical records. What he found terrified him. These beings had fought wars with weapons that could destroy entire continents. They had survived plagues that killed millions. They had lived through ice ages and asteroid impacts that would have ended most civilizations. And they talked about it like it was no big deal. "You dropped nuclear weapons on your own planet," Thane said in amazement. "Multiple times." "That was a long time ago," Blake said with a shrug. "We learned from those mistakes. Humans are good at adapting." While they were talking, the planet decided to remind everyone how dangerous it was. The ground began to shake violently. Rocks fell from the cliffs, and geysers of poisonous gas shot up from cracks in the earth. "Earthquake!" Thane shouted to his soldiers. Everyone back to the ships. The Vorthans ran for safety, their heavy armor clanking as they moved. Their ships were built to withstand the planet's dangers, and they needed to reach shelter before the seismic activity got worse. But the humans didn't run. Instead, they calmly secured their equipment and helped their injured crew members to a safe spot near the cliff face. They moved with practiced efficiency, like they had done this many times before. Tom checked his improvised instruments. Magnitude 7.2, he announced. Not too bad. Should be over in a few minutes. Lisa made sure everyone was away from anything that might fall. Remember the big one we had in California last year? This is nothing compared to that. The earthquake continued for several minutes. The Vorthans watched from their ships as the humans simply waited it out. When the shaking stopped, the humans went back to work as if nothing had happened. Commander Thane couldn't understand it. A seismic event that would devastate most civilizations was just a minor inconvenience to these beings. But the real shock came later that day. One of the Vorthan landing craft had been damaged during the earthquake. A fuel line was broken, leaking, dangerous chemicals that would eat through their protective suits in minutes. Thane was preparing to write off the ship when Tom approached him. "Need some help with that?" the human engineer asked, pointing at the damaged craft. "It's too dangerous," Thane warned. "The chemical leak will kill you." Tom looked at the green gas rising from the ship. "Oh, that stuff? We use something similar. In our factories on Earth. I'll just hold my breath and fix the leak." Before Thane could stop him, Tom walked into the toxic cloud. The Vorthan commander watched in horror as the small human disappeared into the deadly gas. 10 minutes later, Tom emerged, coughing slightly, but otherwise fine. "All fixed," he said cheerfully. "Just needed to replace a seal." Thane stared at the human engineer. Tom had just survived exposure to chemicals that would have dissolved a Vorthan warrior in seconds. That evening, the humans invited the Vorthans to share their dinner. Lisa had caught several more of the local predators, and they were roasting them over an open fire. "What do you call these creatures?" Thane asked, looking at the meat. "We just call them the six-legged ones," Lisa replied. "They're pretty tasty once you get used to them." Thane consulted his species database. The creatures the humans were casually eating were called bone crushers. They were apex predators that young Vorthan warriors trained for years to face in single combat. The humans were having them for dinner. "How do you kill them?" Thane asked weakly. Lisa held up a simple knife. "Usually just this. Sometimes I use a stick if I can't get close enough." Thane realized that everything he thought he knew about the galaxy was wrong. These humans weren't a primitive species that needed protection. They were the most dangerous beings he had ever encountered, and they didn't even know it. Word about the impossible humans spread through the Vorthan fleet like wildfire. Young Vorthan soldiers gathered around viewing screens, watching recordings of the humans doing things that should have been impossible. They saw Tom working in deadly gas without protection. They watched Lisa hunt apex predators with simple tools. They couldn't believe their eyes. "These humans are incredible," whispered Soldier Rex to his friend. "They make our greatest warriors look weak." "Maybe we could learn from them," his friend replied. "Imagine if we could be that tough." But the older Vorthans were worried. Commander Thane called another meeting with his officers. "These beings are changing everything," Thane said, his voice heavy with concern. "Our young soldiers are starting to think humans are better than us. What happens to Vorthan pride if word gets out that tiny aliens can do things we can't?" Officer Kane nodded grimly. "Some of the crew are already asking why we need all this heavy armor if humans can survive with just their skin." Thane looked out at the human camp through his ship's window. The humans were working on their broken ship, making repairs with scraps and determination. They looked so small and fragile, but he now knew they were anything but weak. "There's something else," Kane continued. "The weather reports show a massive storm system approaching. Category 9 hurricane winds, with lightning that could melt our armor. It's the kind of storm that kills everything on the surface." Thane studied the weather data. The storm would hit in 2 days. Even his armored ships would need to leave the planet's surface to avoid destruction. "The humans have to evacuate," Thane decided. I won't let them die because of their stubborn pride. He walked to the human camp, his heavy boots crunching on the rocky ground. Captain Blake was helping Tom install a new power coupling in their ship's engine. "Captain," Thane announced, "you must listen to me now. A deadly storm is coming. The winds will be over 200 miles per hour. The lightning could melt metal. Nothing can survive on the surface during this storm." Blake looked up from his work. "How long do we have?" 2 days at most." "That's plenty of time," Blake said, turning back to the engine. "We should have basic power back online by tomorrow. Then we can find shelter in our ship." Thane couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Your ship is broken. It can't protect you from this storm." Tom wiped grease from his hands. "We've been through worse storms on Earth. Hurricane Katrina was pretty bad and people survived that. We'll manage." "You don't understand," Thane said desperately. "This isn't like your Earth storms. This storm will kill you." Lisa joined the conversation. "With respect, Commander, we've been taking care of ourselves for a long time. We know how to survive bad weather." Thane realized that normal arguments wouldn't work. These humans had survived so much that they thought they could survive anything. He needed to prove to them that some challenges were too dangerous even for them. "Very well," Thane said formally. "I challenge you to prove your worthiness. If you can pass the crucible, I will recognize your right to make your own choices. But if you fail, you must accept evacuation for your own safety." Blake raised an eyebrow. "What's the crucible?" "It is our most sacred test," Thane explained. "Young Vorthans attempted to prove they are ready to be warriors. Most fail. Many die trying." He pointed toward a distant mountain range. "You must cross the Valley of Fire during the seismic hours. Fight through the bone crusher nests in the crystal caves. Then retrieve the sacred stone from the heart of the lightning fields. If you complete these tasks, no Vorthan will question your strength again." The humans looked at each other. The challenge sounded dangerous, but they had faced danger before. "How long does it usually take?" Blake asked. "Our fastest warrior completed it in 12 hours. Most take much longer if they survive at all." Tom scratched his head. "Doesn't sound too bad. We've done survival training that was probably tougher." Thane stared at the human engineer. Survival training tougher than the crucible? What kind of world had created these beings? "I accept your challenge," Blake said firmly. "But my crew and I work as a team. If we do this, we do it together." This confused Thane even more. Vorthan culture valued individual strength and achievement. The idea of facing the crucible as a team was completely foreign to them. "Very well," Thane agreed reluctantly. "You may choose 3 of your people to attempt the trials." Blake didn't hesitate. "Tom, Lisa, and myself." The next morning, the 3 humans prepared for the crucible. They packed light, some water, basic tools, and Lisa's medical kit. The Vorthans watched in amazement as the humans prepared to face their greatest challenge with equipment that looked like camping gear. "Don't you want weapons?" Thane asked. "Armor? Heavy equipment?" Blake held up a simple knife. "This should be enough. We prefer to travel light." Tom checked his basic toolkit. "Too much gear just slows you down. Better to be fast and smart than slow and heavy." Lisa made sure her medical supplies were secure. "Besides, the best weapon is knowing how to avoid fights in the first place." Thane led them to the entrance of the Valley of Fire. The ground here was cracked and broken, with lava bubbling up through gaps in the rock. The air shimmered with heat, and the smell of sulfur was overwhelming. "This is where the crucible begins," Thane announced. "You must cross this valley during the earthquake hours when the ground moves and splits open. Most who enter never come out." Blake looked at the dangerous landscape ahead. It reminded him of the volcanic regions on Earth, places where humans had built cities and lived normal lives. "Looks hot," he commented casually. Tom checked his watch. "When do the earthquakes start?" "In 1 hour," Thane replied. "Are you sure you want to do this? It's not too late to accept evacuation." Blake smiled at his crewmates. "We didn't come this far to give up now. Besides, someone has to show these aliens what humans can do." Lisa shouldered her pack. "Let's get this over with. I want to be back in time for dinner." As the three humans walked into the Valley of Fire, Thane wondered if he had just sent them to their deaths. But part of him, a part he didn't want to admit, was curious to see what these impossible beings could accomplish. The crucible had never been attempted by a team before. It had certainly never been attempted by aliens who considered Deathworlds to be home. Today, the galaxy would learn what humans were truly capable of. The three humans entered the Valley of Fire just as the ground began to shake. Cracks opened in the rocky surface, releasing jets of superheated steam and poisonous gas. Most beings would have turned back immediately, but Blake, Tom, and Lisa walked forward like they were taking a stroll through a park. Commander Thane watched from his ship's monitors, expecting to see the humans panic or retreat. Instead, he saw something that amazed him. "Look at how they move," Officer Kane said, studying the screen. "They're not fighting the earthquakes, they're working with them." Tom was reading the patterns in the ground movement just like he had learned during his years working in Earth's unstable mining regions. "The shaking follows a rhythm," he told his teammates. "If we time our steps right, we can use the ground movement to help us jump across the bigger gaps." Lisa pointed to the steam vents. "And those gas jets are shooting up every 30 seconds. We can use them as markers to navigate." Blake nodded. "Just like crossing the volcanic fields in Iceland. Same principles, different planet. What would have taken a Vorthan warrior hours to cross carefully, the humans navigated in 40 minutes. They didn't fight against the dangerous environment. They understood it and used it to their advantage. The second challenge waited in the crystal caves. These tunnels were home to packs of bone crushers, the six-legged predators that the humans had been eating for dinner. According to Vorthan tradition, warriors had to fight through the nests using strength and courage. But the humans had a different approach. "These things hunt by scent and sound," Lisa observed, examining claw marks on the cave walls. "But they're territorial, each pack stays in its own area." Tom found fresh droppings near one tunnel entrance. "This way is active. Let's try that passage instead." They moved through the caves like ghosts, avoiding most of the predators entirely. When they did encounter a bone crusher, they worked together in ways that confused the creatures. One predator cornered them in a narrow tunnel. Instead of fighting it head-on like a Vorthan warrior would, Blake distracted it from the front while Tom climbed above it and Lisa flanked it from the side. The creature didn't know which threat to focus on, and the humans easily avoided its attacks until it gave up and retreated. "Poor thing," Lisa said, watching the predator run away. "It's probably never seen pack hunters before." The Vorthans monitoring their progress couldn't believe what they were seeing. The humans had crossed the crystal caves in 2 hours without killing a single bone crusher. They had turned the most dangerous part of the crucible into a stealth exercise. The final challenge was the lightning fields. This area was constantly struck by electrical storms that could melt armor and fry any electronic equipment. Vorthan warriors usually ran through as fast as possible, hoping to grab the sacred stone before being struck by lightning. The humans stood at the edge of the field, studying the storm patterns. "It's just like the electrical storms over the Sahara," Blake observed. "The lightning follows the magnetic field lines." Tom pulled out a piece of metal from the ship's debris he had been carrying. "If we can predict where the strikes will hit, we can use them instead of avoiding them." Lisa looked confused. "Use lightning? How?" "The sacred stone is sitting on a metal pedestal in the center of the field," Tom explained. "The lightning strikes are probably charging it with energy. If we time it right, we can ride an electromagnetic pulse to get there faster." What Tom was suggesting would have sounded like suicide to any Vorthan, but the humans had grown up on a planet where people routinely flew through thunderstorms and worked with dangerous electrical systems. They waited for the right moment, then ran into the field just as a massive lightning strike hit the central area. Instead of being fried by the electrical discharge, they used the electromagnetic disturbance to guide their path through the chaos. Blake reached the sacred stone first, a glowing crystal about the size of a football. As he grabbed it, another lightning bolt struck nearby, but the humans were already moving away from the danger zone. They emerged from the lightning fields after only 30 minutes, singed but smiling. Commander Thane met them at the exit, his mouth hanging open in shock. 6 hours, he said weakly. You completed the crucible in 6 hours. Not bad, Blake said, handing over the sacred stone. Though I have to say, your planet's storms are pretty mild compared to some places on Earth. Tom wiped soot from his face. The timing was tricky, but once you figure out the patterns, it's not so hard. Lisa checked her teammates for injuries. Everyone okay? Good. Now let's get back to the ship, I'm hungry. The Vorthans stared at the 3 humans in complete silence. These beings had just accomplished something that their greatest warriors struggled to do, and they were talking about it like it was a minor inconvenience. How? Thane finally asked. How did you do it so easily? Blake shrugged. We worked together, and we've had lots of practice dealing with dangerous environments. Practice? Officer Kane spoke up. Where could you practice anything like this? Earth, Tom said simply. Our home planet is full of places like this. Volcanoes, earthquakes, storms, dangerous animals. We grow up learning to handle them. Thane accessed Earth's database again, looking at it with new understanding. These humans hadn't just survived on a death world. They had thrived there. They had learned to work as teams, to read environmental patterns, and to adapt to any challenge. You are not just tough survivors, Thane said with growing respect. You are the ultimate survivors. Your species has mastered things my people are still learning. Blake smiled. We're just humans. We do what we have to do to stay alive. The storm that Thane had been worried about arrived that evening. The winds howled at over 200 miles per hour, and lightning turned the sky white with constant flashes. The Vorthans retreated to their heavily armored ships and waited for it to pass. But the humans stayed in their partially repaired ship, making final adjustments to their engines while the storm raged outside. When morning came, the Pathfinder was ready to fly. We should be able to make it home now, Tom announced. Thanks for all your help. Commander Thane stood beside the human ship as they prepared to leave. Before you go, he said formally, I want to offer an alliance between Earth and the Vorthan Empire. We could learn much from each other. Blake considered the offer. That sounds good, but I have to warn you. Earth has lots of places that are even more dangerous than this planet. Thane laughed, a sound that was no longer threatening but full of admiration. I would like to see these places someday. Maybe your people could teach mine how to survive them. Maybe, Lisa said, climbing into the ship. But you might want to start with something easier first, like a nice, quiet volcano. As the Pathfinder lifted off into space, Commander Thane watched it go with a new understanding. The galaxy was full of different species, but humans were something special. They didn't just survive in hostile environments. They made hostile environments feel like home, and they did it all while working together, helping each other, and making it look easy. The Vorthans had thought they were the ultimate warriors. But they had just met beings who were something even better, the ultimate survivors who had learned that the greatest strength came not from individual power, but from working together to overcome any challenge. The humans were heading home to their death world, carrying with them the coordinates of a dozen Vorthan planets and the beginning of a friendship that would change both species forever.